it. Damn!
Hello, this is Chris Pratt from Eurogamer, and here are some things I've learnt whilst playing Overwatch over the last few months. Number one, let's just get this right out of the way because it seems to be one of the biggest hurdles that people face when being introduced to this game. Bastion, right, isn't overpowered. You just need to learn to switch heroes properly. Okay, so I know a lot of new players seem to run into issues with this character. When Bastion Sentry Mode is activated, it turns into a stationary but very powerful turret with loads of ammunition, and it still has the ability to self-heal. That tends to mean that if a half-decent Bastion player gets into a half-decent spot, especially when on the defending team, it seems impossible to try and move the payload or capture an objective. Heroes like your man Winston here, they just get torn apart. That's why, if you're having trouble with a Bastion, you need to switch to a real counter. You want one of the snipers, Hanzo or Widowmaker. They can take a Bastion from a range that it just can't deal with. A few good shots and it's dead, or at the very least repositioning. Or you could pick Genji and use his wonderful deflect ability to kill the Bastion with its own bullets. That's especially satisfying, I find. These heroes offer the perfect abilities for the problem you're facing, and there's always an example like that. There's always a perfect counter to think about. Hero switching in Overwatch isn't just a novelty feature, it's often the difference between winning and losing matches. Remember, the only downside to switching out to a new hero is that you'll lose whatever ultimate charge you currently have. That's it. Switch out, kill the Bastion, be the hero, stop moaning on Twitter. Number two, speaking of ultimates, did you know that you can see when your teammates actually have theirs ready to use? If you bring up the overview screen, which is tab on the PC and probably another button if you're not playing on the PC, and you see this glowing tick right underneath the player's name, that means their ultimate is fully charged, and that's useful information because it lets you think about things like synergy. Oh, lovely word in Overwatch is synergy. If you know the Pharah on your team, for example, has a rocket barrage ready to go, and you're playing as a Zarya, well then you want to make sure that your gravity bomb traps the enemy players and allows her to clean up. That's how you wipe teams. And if you're not using voice chat, remember you can bring up the dialogue wheel and tell people exactly what percentage your ultimate is at, really easily, and this lets that Pharah know that maybe they should hold her for a few moments so you can both activate your abilities at exactly the same time. Look at that! Synergy. Number three, do you know the difference between health, shield, and armor? You might think that you do, but there's a little more to it than most realize. Health is easy enough, right? You get shot, you lose it. It won't regenerate on its own because you'll need a healer or a medkit or something else before those points come back. Lose all the hit points and you die. That one's very, very straightforward. Now, if you're playing a character with a shield, or you receive the shield buff from Symmetra, then you'll find that those points are removed first and foremost, as in before your health. It's always the shield that goes first. However, your shield will regenerate on its own if you're not hit for 3 seconds. Finally, armor. Now this is also taken away before you start losing any health. It won't regenerate on its own, but the important difference here is that armor grants you a little bit of damage reduction too. For every hit that you take whilst your character has armor points remaining, you're protected from 5 points of damage. That doesn't sound like a lot, and in some cases it really isn't, but it means if you're playing a character like Tracer, whose individual bullets don't do a lot of damage, and you run up against a Diva who has by default loads of armor, you're really going to struggle. So much of your damage is being negated here, even at close range. 5 points of damage from every single shot just isn't being registered. However, if you were to use Tracer's ultimate, the Sticky Bomb, which I think does 400 points of damage as default, well, here it's still going to do 395 points of damage against Diva's armor. The armor, even in this case, is only protecting against 5 points of damage per hit. That Sticky Bomb is 1 hit. Thank you to Blue Eyed Illusion on the Overwatch subreddit for pointing this out. I'll include a link to their post in the video description, and as they point out at the end, this is worth knowing about, because if you're playing a character like Zarya, for example, who has a bunch of shield, and you pick up a Torbjorn armor buff, right? The shield is always removed first, every single time, and that means that an enemy player has to get through all of that shield, and then those 75 points of armor before they can stop you from receiving that damage reduction. That's really useful. Armor's way better than most people give it credit for. Number 4, the payload heals you whilst you're on the attacking team. A slightly more straightforward tip next, but one that might save your life every so often. Standing next to the payload whilst on a fence heals you slowly over time. Combine that with the fact that characters like Torbjorn and Symmetra can place their turrets directly onto the payload, and the Bastion can set up on top of it, perhaps with a Reinhardt standing just in front, and it's often worth fighting right next to this thing when you can. The payload is your friend. Let it heal you. Number 5, audio cues. We've done a whole other video on this topic if you're interested in sound design, but here are the useful bits in terms of getting better at this video game. Did you know that when a hero uses their ultimate and they're on the enemy team, the line they shout, like "Justice reigns from above, Luthera," whatever it is that Hanzo says, that line is different from what you hear when the same hero uses the ability on your team.
Rocket barrage incoming!
This lets you react to what's happening immediately based on what you hear. The words "nerf this," for example, tell you that a D.Va's just turned up and is using self-destruct. This means that you can react to what's happening without actually seeing it, which is handy. Another good one is the footsteps. Every hero has different sounding footsteps. So I won't go through them all here. There are videos that do that, and I'll link to that in the description as well. But yeah, every hero has a unique footstep sound, and if they're on the enemy team, those footsteps are considerably louder than those made by your allies, which means if you're paying attention, you can use that to turn quickly as an enemy Reaper sneaks up on you and tries to kill you. And, sorry, one more thing actually, if you're playing as that Reaper, right, you'll have those really loud footsteps. His are some of probably the most obvious in the game, big weighty things that scream, "I'm gonna come shoot you with my shotguns." But, do you know that if you crouch, you make considerably less noise? You look ridiculous, mind you, completely ridiculous, but considerably less noise. Listen to this. It's good, isn't it? And finally, number 6, headshots. No, seriously, headshots. The amount of people that don't seem to take advantage of this is ridiculous. With the exception of just a few attacks like Pharah's rockets or Reinhardt's hammer, most heroes can score additional damage if they do land a headshot. How much additional damage? Well, it's twice the normal amount. That's absolutely huge. Each hero has a slightly different hitbox to think about here, but they're mostly very obvious. I'm going to say shoot them in the head is a good rule of thumb to stick to, with 2 exceptions, which come with D.Va. You want to make sure that you're shooting her in the head, as in D.Va the character and not her mech, and a Sentry Mode Bastion, who you want to shoot here instead, which I think is kind of a cool novelty. Yeah, don't just go for body shots. You're missing out on double damage and this very pleasing hit marker. Okay, that'll do it, I guess. Hopefully you feel slightly more informed than you did at the start of this video, and if you don't, you're already pretty good at this game to begin with, and you knew that when you clicked on it, so don't start. If you did enjoy it, please do give us a like, and you can even watch some of the other Overwatch stuff that we've done. I'd recommend the one on sound design that I mentioned earlier, but really, you're in charge of your own destiny here. Pick whatever you want. Cheers very much for watching, and we'll catch you next time.